The FBI raid is unraveling as the Justice Department once again suffers another loss in the courts. We're going to take a look at the latest developments in this FBI debacle. We're going to see how the DOJ has clearly overplayed their hand in all this. And make sure to stick with me at the very end of this video when I'll reveal the real reason why this FBI raid is unraveling right before our very eyes. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. It's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, here to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, gang, we are less than 10 days away from our national premiere of my new movie, The Return of the American Patriot, The Rise of Pennsylvania. It is now available for pre-sale at a discounted price by clicking on the link below. And the best part is when you purchase this movie right now, you have the opportunity to join me and thousands of other patriots in my brand new community on Locals, where together we're standing up against woke cancel culture in a censor-free environment. And there we've got special bonus content from myself, from my team, and even from the next governor of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano. The movie will be released on September 15th, but pre-purchase it now to get exclusive discounts, bonus content, and best of all, stand up against the woke mob as a courageous patriot. Make sure to click on that link below or go to the Return of the American Patriot.com. All right, gang, let's dive right in here in a huge win for the Trump team and in yet another massive defeat for the Justice Department. A federal judge has indeed ordered the appointment of a special master to review the documents seized by FBI agents at Mar-a-Lago. And the cherry on the top in all of this, the judge has also ordered the halting of the use of the documents in the FBI's investigation of Trump. This is the second defeat in a row suffered by the Justice Department following its embarrassingly disastrous and ultimately futile attempt at keeping the affidavit from being released to the public. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon issued a ruling that orders the government to suspend its criminal investigation of Trump to the extent that such an investigation is based on the documents that were seized at Mar-a-Lago until what's called a special master is appointed to offer an independent review. My namesake, Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington University. You see him all the time on Fox News. He's argued for weeks now for the appointment of a special master. And a special master, if you don't know, is appointed by a court to carry out some specified directed action on the court's behalf. And the idea here is that a special master would be a third party coming into this mess in order to provide at least some semblance of transparency and legitimacy. And that latter term, legitimacy, is key here, as we'll find out at the end of our video. The special master would provide a supposedly objective set of eyes that could provide at least some insight and information to what the FBI actually seized at Mar-a-Lago, and perhaps assuage concerns that this whole thing was nothing more than a pathetic political hit job. I am very skeptical of that. Don't get me wrong. A win's a win, right? I'm glad to see the DOJ getting hammered repeatedly in the courts, but I don't think a special master is going to restore any semblance of legitimacy in this whole process. But it was a win for the Trump team for sure. Here's legal pundit Andrew McCarthy on Fox News the other day saying just that.
Now let's bring in former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy. Andy, you just heard David Spunt discuss the time delay in all of this, but there are other things to consider in this opinion, especially, or this ruling, especially considering some of the things surrounding executive privilege. What's in here when it comes to that, and is this a win for the Trump team?
Oh, it's a big win for the Trump team, and it's a potentially explosive ruling if it holds. I would imagine it's important enough that the government will appeal this immediately. But, you know, in a nutshell, what happened here is the Justice Department assumed that Trump only had attorney-client privilege, that he did not have executive privilege, or at least to the limited extent that as a former president he maintains executive privilege, it can't be asserted against the executive branch itself. And it's one thing for the government to have that theory. I think that actually may be a sound theory. But the problem is it's not 100% settled. So I thought it was incumbent on them to get a ruling from the court on that question before they hauled off and did what they did, which was have the privilege team go through all of the seized documents, assuming that Trump only had attorney-client privilege, and then allowing all of the potentially executive privilege documents to go to the prosecution team, which, if it turns out that they're privileged, that could taint the prosecutors who reviewed them, and it could also taint their investigation because they're now conducting an investigation. Remember, they got these documents 2 weeks ago, and they've had these documents, the prosecution team has, for about a week. So, they've been merrily along conducting their investigation with the agents, assuming all these documents were appropriate for the investigation. Now the judge is saying, hold everything. He may have executive privilege.
Now, you'll note here that the key to all of this is the question of whether Trump does, in fact, have what is called executive privilege. Executive privilege is the power that the president has to withhold what he or she deems confidential information from the courts and from Congress. The privilege is rooted in the separation of powers doctrine that gives the president, as the chief executive of the nation, the ability to classify or declassify whatever the president wants and to share or not share whatever he wants with the courts or Congress. What we're finding here is that the political class has gotten so nervous about Trump. They're freaking out so much over the threat that he poses to their rule that they're actually trying to strip Trump of his constitutional executive power to classify. It's an astonishing overreach. Again, this is why you have people like Robert Barnes saying that the FBI and the DOJ are basically trying to desperately accuse Trump of a crime that legally he cannot commit. The absurdity of this, it's akin to faulting a home plate umpire in baseball for calling a strike, not because the pitch wasn't a strike, but because you're questioning his authority to call a pitch a strike, which of course is utterly absurd. That's what home plate umpires do. But that's where we're going. We're entering into uncharted waters here, where the DOJ has clearly overplayed its hand. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the DOJ actually tried to make the argument in court that an appointment of a special master would be a threat to national security. I mean, again, this is how unhinged these people are. My namesake, Jonathan Turley, again, was pointing out that special masters look at classified documents all the time. It's relatively easy to find a special master with national security clearance that will handle the documents responsibly, certainly more responsibly than the FBI agents that scattered the documents all over the floor at Trump's estate. I mean, talk about a self-own. This is the single most sensitive national security secrets in the world, we're told, that we've just scattered all across the floor, and then we decided to take a picture of them. I mean, it's beyond cringe at this point. But that photograph does underscore precisely why so many of us have lost confidence and any sense of trustworthiness in the federal government. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of citizens who've completely lost any semblance of confidence in the trustworthiness of the federal government. Made all the worse, by the way, by that Biden embarrassment last Thursday night, right? I don't think such confidence can be restored for tens of millions of citizens unless Trump gets back into office and the MAGA movement takes over D.C. And I think that explains a lot of what's actually going on right now. But did you know this show, together with our podcast platform, gets more views than CNN? Yeah, I know it's not that hard to do. I get it. But did you know that you can listen to the same content and even more on my censor-free podcast platform? With my new podcast, you can listen to my analysis while you're driving down the road, while you're doing housework, heck, while you're at work, right? Why not? Make sure to check out my podcast by clicking on the link below, and please share them with your friends. It means more than you'll ever know. All right, so here's why I think in many respects we're in such a tumultuous moment at the present time. If you think it through, when all is said and done, what is the key characteristic of the state, the government? What can the government do that basically no other institution can? It's very interesting because scholars from Max Weber in the early 20th century all the way to today recognize that the key characteristic of the modern state is its monopolization of violence over a given territory. The state alone has the right to invade your house without being guilty of breaking and entering. It has the right to seize your property without being guilty of theft. It has the right to arrest you and jail you without being guilty of kidnapping. It even has the right to kill you, for heaven's sakes, without being guilty of murder. The state is the sole institution that has what's called a monopoly over violence. It alone has the authority to inflict violence on a population, but, and this is absolutely key, it can only do so as long as the state has a significant degree of what scholars call legitimation, okay? Legitimation is the trust, it's the faith that citizens have in government that in effect justifies the privileged position of the state over and against any other social institution. Once that legitimation crumbles, the state's sole prerogative to use legal violence crumbles right along with it. That's the state that we are in today. Tens of millions of Americans no longer trust the federal government to govern honestly and fairly. And as such, no amount of posturing by the federal government, such as in this case appointing a special master, is going to ultimately make any difference in that perception. By the way, this is precisely why Biden is calling us anti-democratic and national security threats. It's because he and the Democrats, the powers that be, know that the ultra-MAGA crowd is questioning the legitimacy necessary for the political class to exercise their power unencumbered. But we all know that the loss of legitimacy is not because of anti-democratic impulses on our part. As documented by a number of studies over the last decade, there's been a steady erosion of trust in the government precisely because of the way the political class has alienated itself and its values and concerns away from the values, interests, and concerns of the people. Ironically, it is the aloofness of the political class that is responsible for its own delegitimation. And it's only by replacing that class with a new breed of ultra-MAGA warriors dedicated to representing the values of the people, faith, family, and freedom. It's the only way that trust and faith in our federal government can ultimately be restored. So we'll clearly keep an eye on how things develop here, but I think, make no mistake, the FBI's raid is unraveling, not because just of a series of defeats in the courts, that's certainly the case, but ultimately because of their loss of any confidence by the people. That will be their ultimate undoing. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button, and you'll definitely want to check out my latest video on Biden getting absolutely humiliated in his red speech by a massive, and I do mean massive, backlash against it. You're going to love it. So make sure to click on that link, and I will see you over there. God bless.